Hello, this is Dr. J with another exciting video lecture module. This one's on reproduction and development. Here we can see a sperm about to fertilize an egg. That's my rooster, my rooster in the background. Okay, so you probably know all of this stuff here, but you might not know much about this. Look at this. Embryologically, we all start out the same. At about 5 to 6 weeks, you cannot tell if it's a boy or a girl. We can see that there are orange and blue parts that have the capacity to become the gonads of the male, the testis, or the gonads of the female, the ovaries. There's also additional structures here which have the capacity to develop into the fallopian tubes in the uterus if this particular individual has two X chromosomes. Remember that in the 23rd position, two X's means it's going to develop into the girl. So there are a lot of genes that are turned on and turned off so that she ends up with all of these parts. If the developing embryo has an X and a Y chromosome, though, that Y chromosome has tons of genetic switches to turn things off, preventing the development of the female parts and promoting the development of these turquoise tubes, which become the epididymis, the vas deferens, the seminal vesicles. These are all important structures and glands that produce semen, or they will after puberty. In the female, we can see the fallopian tubes. The ovaries are going to produce eggs, which will eventually flow into the fallopian tubes and then into the uterus. Typically, fertilization, later in life, of course, sperm and egg will meet here in the fallopian tube, and then implantation of the developing embryo occurs here in the uterus. And if everything works out right, the baby will develop here, and then during labor and delivery, passing out of the cervix and out of the vagina. So what do we learn here in this very first slide? The male's job is much simpler, biologically speaking, just to produce sperm and to introduce them into the female. The female's job is much, much more complicated. Here's our first feedback loop. This is really the story of puberty. Somewhere in Milwaukee today, some kid is going to go through puberty. Well, at least he's going to start the process. He's going to hit puberty because of the hypothalamus. It's a great example of genetic expression. Remember, we are born with genes that don't turn on until later in life. And this is one example. GnRH, gonadotropin releasing hormone. GnRH is the first stage of puberty in both men and women, and we can see that it affects the pituitary gland. GnRH turns on the production of two other hormones, LH, that's luteinizing hormone, and FSH, that's follicle stimulating hormone. Follicle stimulating hormone has an S in it, which reminds me that it goes to the sustentacular cells for sustentacular. Follicle stimulating hormone causes the sustentacular cells to produce androgen binding protein. Androgen is a class of chemicals which includes testosterone, potentially the most powerful chemical in the universe. Luteinizing hormone from the pituitary gland turns on these other cells, interstitial cells. That word really means surrounding. The interstitial cells are surrounding the tubes that produce the sperm, and the interstitial cells, or Leydig cells, are those that produce the most powerful chemical in the universe, testosterone. So when we have testosterone, and that sticky protein, which will bind testosterone, then we can stimulate tiny primary sperm cells to start this whole process of making sperm. Now, this doesn't happen right away, but frighteningly, we have a lot of 14-year-old kids in this community who are walking around with testosterone that makes them think about girls, and they also have the biological capacity of fertilizing an egg. Oh my gosh, as the father of 2 boys, I'll tell you, there's a real fear when I think about that process and that potential prospect. What else happens? Well, we know that testosterone makes them think about girls. Testosterone also increases the size of their penis and scrotum surrounding tissue. The secondary sex organs, right? The primary sex organs are those that make the gametes. So in this case, the testis, which makes sperm. Secondary sex organs are the other things needed for the act. So the erectile bodies within the penis, you might remember the corpora cavernosa and corpus spongiosum. Also the scrotum, the muscles that are embedded within, and all of the surrounding tissue. So what I recommend is that you print this and cut it apart, or at least cover up the labels. Use little sticky notes like Post-its to rearrange and scramble the hormones. Make sure you can put them in the proper order. Then go on to make flashcards. Really start to look at the process and the effects of each of these individual hormones.